I want to talk about one of my most emotionally charged pieces I have ever made in my life and what the secret meaning of it has been for years. So, the Ecstasy of Saint Sonic painting is one of my most popular, and people love it. And it's based off of this saint who had like a vision of an angel stabbing her to death, and she wrote about how the euphoria of being stabbed, excited her. And so I took that imagery and I put it with Sonic characters, because why not? But I want to talk about my past and some childhood trauma I've talked about a little bit and how it informs this painting. So it's gonna be really heavy and trigger warnings. So, but yeah, so this is gonna go into one thing I've talked about a little bit, which was the medical malpractice I faced as a kid. I was given medication I was allergic to for years. It's around a year. Given a whole host of other drugs to try to stop the symptoms from the initial antibiotics I was allergic to. It was a whole nightmare. I was slowly dying. Super horrible. So I'm going to talk about the symptoms of the pain and how that informs the pain in the painting. So my skin became inelastic and would rip open constantly. And it got so bad to the point that I became completely immobile and I couldn't walk and I couldn't move any part of my body because my skin was constantly raw and open and ripping apart with any small movement. So think about, you can't blink, you can't open your eyes, you can't open your mouth, you can't move your hands, your legs, your torso, you can't sit comfortably, you can't stand comfortably. You're in 24/7 constant pain. And I found a way to stop the pain, but it was a really awful solution. So yeah, severe constant pain with my body. And I would find that burning myself would override the pain receptors and would briefly, momentarily stop the other pain of my body fighting itself viciously, like a constant 24/7 allergic reaction from the antibiotics trying to fight off infections, from my skin ripping open, and it was just a fucking nightmare. So this painting is about the moment that I would take a shower and I would turn the nozzle all the way as hot as possible, and I would open myself up to burning as much as my body as possible and relishing in the couple seconds that the pain would stop. And for a while, once the doctors figured out, oh, you're allergic to these antibiotics, that's causing the whole, chain reaction, and slowly I got better. I was hydrophobic for a while. I was afraid of water. It was really hard. I had to force myself to even wash my hands and stuff. But yeah, it's I've really related to the text from the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa for that reason. And yeah, you can look up people with eczema talk about how really hot water can sometimes be soothing because it numbs the pain receptors or the same pathways. Really awful stuff. But it's a big part of me. It's a big part of my art. So I don't know the exact science behind it, but what in the few minute where I was burning myself and the pain would stop, I remember the joy of just moving my arms properly because of the numbness to the pain receptors, and just feeling joy moving my arm open and closing it. And then I don't know why it would only last for a minute, because it would probably burn into a deeper layer of my skin, and then it would stop numbing and it would just turn back into searing pain. So this is also why I really love a particular song from Lingua Ignota, her song The Sacred Liniment of Judgment, where she starts it off with my wounds that stung before now sing, because I remember some of the imagery in my head while the burning was happening, and it almost felt like I had this imagery of heaven's gates opening up and welcoming me in, because I was blinded by relief, and it felt like my wounds were singing, and they were my pains were lifted and all that stuff. So the heavenly imagery also came from the fact that the shower head and the burning water had to come from above, because it was a stationary shower head. It wasn't maneuverable. I couldn't move it around. So I would have to contort my body to make sure, like, to lift my arms up to get burned, to move my legs in a certain way to make sure that there's the most surface area covered with burning water as possible. And so being forced to look up at it, that's why it clicked like that. It's also why in the painting, Shadow stabs down into Sonic. It's symbolic of the water stabbing down into me. It's also why I really love the sculpture that it's originally based on, the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa sculpture. All right, I want to be really specific here. It was not the boiling point of water, because if it was the actual boiling point of water, your skin would literally melt and you would need skin grafts. I never had to receive skin grafts. I never had to have surgery on my epidermis. My skin never melted. It was specifically the hottest setting that was on the shower head in my family home. And I also never sought out to make a pot of boiling water and burn myself with it to seek out pain relief, specifically because there was a sweet zone where the water was hot enough that it would numb the receptors, and if it was too hot, it was just searing pain. But if it was also, too cold, it would just open up and really hurt all of these open cuts and wounds that were all over my body. So it had to be a very specific hot temperature, but it was not boiling. And I just want to be really specific about that. Okay, final detail, because I feel really insecure about this in an odd way, is that when you look at me, I don't look like I'm someone who's been through the experiences that I talk about. Like, I don't have the battle wounds from something as dramatic as what I'm talking about here. And I don't know why. I don't know. It was the top layer of my epidermis, so it could heal better than if it was further deeper down. I have no clue. Like, for example, one of the doctors that I really trust, that helped me through the process of dealing with so many other doctors who were unintentionally performing medical malpractice on me. He helped me through the recovery process after we sorted out the issue with the drugs I was allergic to. And there was a phase where I still couldn't walk properly, even though the skin looked fine on the outside. And like, I could only take a few steps and I'd be like in searing pain. And this is what he told me, is that the severe scratching from the irritation of my skin attacking itself from all the drugs and all that, I had actually severed the nerves in the back of my legs, and I had to wait for them to regrow, and that caused me to be physically unable to walk for a period of time. When you look at the back of my legs, they don't look like that. They don't look like there's permanent scarring. So this is something I used to have a big complex about, because it's shaped my mental and physical health through my adulthood, this very impactful, traumatic moment in my childhood. And I feel like I don't have physical evidence to prove that it happened, in a very strange way. I don't know why. It is what it is, so I'm just being very honest. So this is just an extra detail. It's not about the Ecstasy of Saint Sonic painting. It's just something that is one of the most fucked up moments of my life. And it has to deal with the medical malpractice. So I was slowly starting to accept the fact that I was dying and that it wasn't getting better. None of the doctors were helping. We went to so many doctors, and it was just this weird loop of them feeling really insecure that they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, and they would just turn me away. It was horrible. So I was starting to go in and out of the hospital, and they sent me home with a huge dose of Bactrim, which is the sulfa-based antibiotic that I was personally allergic to. And I remember at some point my body just started to just outright reject the medication in a more visceral way, because I started to vomit up the medication. And I remember waking up vomiting in my bed, and I remember my parents coming into my room, and they saw that I had vomited up the medication. And I remember my mom she was trying so hard. And she was like, Iris, you have to take it again. And I remember on my own, before anyone else figured it out, I was like, wait a minute. I remember just shaking my head like, I'm not going to take it again. I think this is causing it. And she was like, no, you have to. And I don't know, it's like a really fucked up scenario where the medical malpractice forced me into a situation that mimics Munchausen's by proxy, by having my fucking mom trying her best and like thinking it's the right thing to do. You know what's sad is I never sued. There's never a payout for this trauma. And this is another tangent, but I sometimes think about Diane on BoJack Horseman and her struggles with writing and trauma. And it really resonated with me when I saw it, because she was so worried about when she was writing her book that she couldn't use her trauma properly to make it quote unquote good trauma or worthwhile trauma, to make good art out of it. And part of me is like a little bit satisfied that I could make a really impactful painting out of something that caused me so much pain and grief, but it doesn't make it good trauma or worthwhile. And also to clarify, there was no Munchausen by proxy. My mom is very loving and normal, and she was following orders from the doctors, and we had no clue at the time that it was the antibiotics that were causing the reactions. I don't know, it's a huge part of Bribob. It's woven into the whole arc of Steven's skin sloughing off, is me venting about my own skin falling off as a kid. So, okay, I want to give some context after the antibiotic vomit incident happened. So yeah, I threw up the medication. My mom came in and was begging me to take more of it because I had so many concurrent staph infections that there's a risk for sepsis if I didn't take the antibiotics I was allergic to. So I remember shaking my head no and feeling for the first time scared that I couldn't trust what I was being given. And after my mom's, I remember her face, it's burned into my mind. She was so sad. She was like, "You please take it." And I did. And the next morning, like, the edema, I was so swollen and like red, and I couldn't recognize myself in the mirror for a very long time. But that morning, after that incident, we just went straight back to the hospital, and then it was the final visit where they finally figured out what was wrong. And it wasn't a doctor that figured it out, it was a nurse. And she had offhandedly said like, "Oh, you know, people are allergic to Bactrim sometimes, so maybe that's what's causing it." And they did a controlled test in the hospital where they gave me a dose and then watched my symptoms over the next 24 hours, and then they figured it out. Ridiculous. And yeah, I want to end this video because it's very heavy. It talks about a lot of stuff that matters to me. I want to end it with some positivity and hope, because there was a moment where I lost hope in the process, where my fingers were so inelastic and I had so many infections and like boils and blisters on my hands. I couldn't move my fingers anymore, and I couldn't draw. And I remember when I couldn't hold a pencil properly, and that was the first time in my life as a kid where the phrase "I give up" popped in my head. I was like, I can't draw. I have no future. It's just gonna be this severe suffering. And I remember the light in me died. Like, I feel it. I remember feeling it. And then my memory blanks until the vomitings. My memory blanks until the final hospital visit. I don't know the time period between when I gave up hope and when it stopped. And it's really, really silly, but that's why I added Nagito's character. Okay, sorry. This is why I added Nagito's character in Bribob, because hope is so powerful. And it's really scary when you lose all hope, because that's when my health started to deteriorate really bad. And my family talked about, because I don't have any memories of this portion of it, but when I stopped eating and when I was really accepting death is when I lost hope. So I don't know. I want to say don't lose hope. Okay, I've got a crazy anecdote about this painting and Nagito specifically, so I have to include it in here. And basically, Bryce Papenbrook did a meet and greet right in my town, just randomly. And I had to show up to it because, like, he voices Nagito. I have to. So I went through it and waited in line for like 6 hours to see him. And when I got up to him, I was literally speechless. I've never been starstruck in my life, but I literally couldn't speak. And then I got one of the Bribob panels signed that had a drawing of Nagito, and it was really cool. And then I went home and I was like, man, I'm never going to see this dude again. And he inspired so much of my art, like unknowingly. And I think I have to go back, buy another ticket, wait in line just to show him the Bribob scroll and this painting on screen, The Ecstasy of Saint Sonic. So I actually did that. I bought another ticket. I went back the next day and brought my big portfolio and waited in line, did it all. And it was really funny. Like, he did his best poker face, but he was like, hey, welcome back. Like, because it's kind of silly coming back 2 days in a row. And I was so melodramatic. I was like, I have to show you my magnum opus. And then he was like, okay. And I pulled out this painting, The Ecstasy of Saint Sonic. And it was really cool to see him like in awe from it. He was like, whoa, I could never draw like that. It was really cool. And then we talked about Nagito's character for a little bit. And don't worry, I did not trauma dump on the poor dude about what this video is about. But I did want to hint at how much I liked Nagito's character because of his obsession with hope, because I'm obsessed with hope. I feel like hope has sustained me through really hard times. But it was really, really interesting talking to Bryce Papenbrook about it, because, now don't quote me on it because it's been a couple months, but he was like, he felt like the complete opposite of Nagito when voicing him, and to get into that headspace to voice him was very interesting. And that from our conversation, he sounded almost like perturbed by Nagito as a character, where I felt like very differently about him. Yeah, I don't know, it's just very hilarious that I got to physically show this painting to a super cool dude in person. Yeah, I don't know, the rest of this video is kind of a super bummer, so I thought this was kind of a cool little thing. If you haven't seen the Bribob scroll, I should probably do a sit down and show it on YouTube as well, so I'll have that up here too.